Okay, so as you can see, all this gone totally nice and dry and hard, and that's what you need with any type of sanding. It's best to go away, leave it, let it totally go hard, because as soon as you might think it's dry on the top, you get through, you get the rolling thing, and it just peels all away, and it's no good. So this one's been left for a couple of days now, actually, over the weekend, to totally go off and go hard. Then all we do, there's two ways of doing it. You've got the quick way of sanding, which you come along with a very coarse file, yeah, and literally just a couple of passes over the big area until you see where you get dark and light patches, just down here. So as I say, you get this sort of a dark area and a light. You know the light is dusty because you've sanded it, and obviously we've got super glue to contend with, so in some ways it's quite nice to come along with a very strong file like this, just to get us down to where we want to be. If you're doing something that doesn't need much filing at all, or you haven't got any super glue in there, you probably won't need a file like this, which is really going to rip its way through. What we're going to do, we're looking for it all to be the same colour and to have no raised areas, and because we've got a lump of super glue in there that's now set rock hard like resin, we need to get all the way through that back down to plastic, so we're just leaving little areas. So once we're roughly through, we've got a little bit still here, all we do, we switch over to a finer grit, a file, and then we're just going to go in with that one, just to sort of polishing it up, if you like, and get rid of all those sort of scratch marks and things that are going on in there. And as you can see, we've got this little white area here, which is actually a dusty area, so we need to get rid of that a moment. So we just sand through, because it's backed up. There we go, all in there, all nice. So as I say, cutting along to a rougher file, sorry, a smoother file. It's not quite as rough as the other one, and we just polish in there, just like so. Okay, and then we come along with a finer one again, which is just taking out all those scratches. Really, the work's been done. As I say, it's just scratching, this is taking out. So we go in there just like that, and then spongy is always a nice one if you get yourself a pretty coarse one. So we just give this a sand just like that, and this is just really just a bit like when you perhaps your partner or yourself's doing your nails, where they're buffing them up. This is what this is doing, so you're really just working through the grades. And then finally we just come along with this one, which, as you see, just buffs it all up. Now we've got this black line in the middle, sorry, here, as you can see, and all that is actually filler, the super glue, which is act as a filler, and obviously it's nice and clear and gives you that type of thing. What I've done underneath is to say you get this type of effect once you've come right the way through it, like here. Move out just a tad, as you can see. So you can see little bits of things around, but we're basically the way. I've got a nasty little one here I've still got to take care of, but as I say, you probably can't see it well on camera, but to me it's there, so it needs to be taken care of. The other way you do it, of course, is obviously get some black paint, as I've done here, paint it along obviously on the top as we've done just here, and that way you can see what it's going to look like. Also, this acrylic paint acts like a bit of a filler, but there again, it does need to be dry. So you come along with a relatively smooth sanding stick, and we're just going to go right the way over this one, and we're looking for any gaps and bits and pieces you might find under and around. And as I say, you can see these areas like this. If we bring you in nice and close, just a little too close for the camera to cope with, there we go. As you see, you can see like the actual areas where the paint is slightly lower and that acted as a bit of a filler, so it just gives you a clue of how much you need to do. But really, you're just looking for it to feel smooth and all the rest of it when you're doing any type of filler. It's sometimes better to overfill, just slap it all on first. Many times I talk to people about doing it, and they talk about filler and being frightened of it. The trouble is, if you try and be clean with your filling and just put little areas in where you need it and go around and masking and all the rest of it, sometimes, you know, whilst that's great for little jobs, if it's a big job and you're trying to get away in a small area, it makes bumps and lumps that are hard to get rid of because you can see them. You're almost better to put a nice generous coat of filler right over the area, covering up, like perhaps we've done here, any details such as panel lines, riveting and things like that. You know, go right over the top of them, sand it all in, get rid of that seam, make it nice and smooth, and then we can just pop round and re-scribe, as we're going to have to do all these little areas in here to get rid of them, and put in some more riveting, which either we use a riveting tool or we can use a needle, any bits and pieces like that, to go round and get them sorted out. As I say, we've still got this flappy area at the back. It doesn't go all the way, but it's just such a nice join back here. I'm hoping it's just going to glue, won't need any filler anyway. This was the important area around there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to carry on sanding up this top bit, make sure we're all happy with it, and then as soon as we're sort of, you know, we're happy with that, how that's looking, and we're sure that we're not going to get any shrinkage, and by shrinkage we mean the filler shrinks back. There's a nice little one to look at here where you can see it's happened over the weekend. You can see the filler has shrunk back. You've got a grey line in between, and that's where it's shrunk, and it's literally peeled apart and left it. You know, so obviously that might need a little bit more filler over the top to take care of that, versus you've got a super glue mark just down in here. But hopefully with some sanding in, we can get in there nice and tight, and perhaps go down into the plastic quite a bit to get rid of those marks. So we'll get those bits done. So next up, what we can do is some of the glass work. Now I've already done this one here. Now you might not have seen me do this before, but you can get masks that are pre-cut to actually put on here to cover up your glass parts, or you can do it the cheap way, which is the way I do it, with masking tape, Tamiya tape, things like that. Obviously you've got your various sizes and types. I've got a 40mm here, and then we've got a 6mm and a 10mm. Basically it's quite nice. This bit area around here is 10mm. So what you can actually do, you just take your bit of your tape like this. Then what you can do, you can lay it across and then go round. Now an interesting one which I'll show you is this one here. Now if I just bring you in a little bit to show you. This window here is particularly sort of odd, if you like. This is the way it goes through, because there's no real sharp edge to these front ones running down. The way around that is, if you take a piece of 10mm Tamiya tape, if you happen to got it, start down the bottom here and line it up with the back part, just like so. Okay, and then just carry it through up to the front. Okay, give it a bit of a squeeze and you can push it through. Then if you take a toothpick, cocktail stick, and just push around your little edges, okay, and just wear them into the actual edge areas and push them in. What that actually does, gets an easier line to follow and cut. You can use your nail, whatever way you want to do it. Then what you can actually do is just come along, sharp blade of your knife. If you hold it up to a light as a background, it actually shows through a lot easier and you can follow it. But basically what you do, you're just going to come along, just cut down. Always best to start in the middle of the actual tape itself. Don't start off to one side, because what tends to happen is if you're coming in from the beginning, the side of the tape here, it tends to drag it, and that can be a bit of a pain. So what we'll do, just put these round. It's a lot easier. If I just hold this up to the light so I can see what I'm doing, it'll be a lot easier. I can do it a bit quicker. So what I'm doing is holding it up, and you can see the line you want to follow. Very straightforward. Okay, so there we go. And what you should be able to do then, very carefully, is just peel off. Make sure you cut right to the edges, not like that. Just missed a corner, just its corner here. So what we'll do is just round it around, like that. And there we go. That's that one done, which is this one here, just like that, which is a quick, easy way of doing it. Now if you come up to something where you've got like a complex curve, certainly these big ones down the bottom, this one at the top, the easiest way I find to do it, just take a piece of 40mm, nice big one like this. Okay, if we do this big one down here, place it in the middle, like that, and then just smooth it around, working from the inside out, and that way you won't get too many creases as you smooth round. And then all we'll do is just pop round with our nail, And all we're trying to do is just even out the crease spread, because the thing is, as long as it's nice and even and we haven't got any massive big creases in it, we should be okay. So if I just push this all in just round like that, then all I'll do, I'll just cut this out just like that, and then hopefully you should be able to just peel it off like that in one, and that's that one done. And it's an easy way to do complex curved shape like that in one, because you could layer down tape, you could go around the outsides and all the rest of it, but I just find it a little bit easier to whip through it like that. So anyway, when you're all done, you've got them all on there like that, you should end up with something like this, which is pretty straightforward. And then all we're going to do for the moment, we'll just bring this along and we're just going to test fit it to the front just like so. I'm not going to hold that fortunately, but it's a pretty good fit. We've got a bit of a gap at the top here, but apart from that the sides are all in nicely. There's no huge gaps which sometimes you can get with helicopters, which is a problem. Now I've got that wiring we can all see in the front, but we're like that. So anyway, that one's okay. You might notice as well I've got some grey on here. This is just where I've done another one of those where you put down some acrylic paint to see how it goes. The other thing I also got is a band going around the back here, because when I came along to do the ramp, looking at the ramp, the way it's going to fit, quite frankly it was a horrible join, because this back area here, when this is at the slant, you get a gap which is probably equivalent to about a foot, which isn't exactly realistic. I can understand why they've done it. It's so obviously for the kit side of the toy factor, if you like, means that it's easier to go in. Personally, it's not very nice. So one more thing I've done, basically cut off those locating tabs at the back. If I pop this on the side, glued in the back part just down there like that, and then taking some styrene tube, and I think this is probably like 5mm styrene tube, all I did, cut it to the right width going across just like that, and then using a sanding stick laid flat, all I did, hold it between two fingers and then lots of this to flatten out the back of it. I've just got to finish this off because I've got to put a little bit of pressure more into the middle of it, because as you imagine, as you hold it, it does tend to do the outside. So all we do it like that until we've almost gone right the way through. It's like a paper thing, and if we drop our nail through it now, you should be able to see it all open up. If I bring you nice and close, you can see. So there we go, we've got our tube running down there just like so. And what that's going to do, we're going to take the back of our ramp here, and this is going to glue to the back just like this to give us a rounded off look to it. Now the reason we've rounded it off like this is so when it goes in the back part, he's going to try and do this whilst holding it all, when it goes in here like so, if we can sort of roughly do it, it will give us a rounded off effect. It's moving round, but it will give us a rounded off look, something like that. As you can see there, by the time it's painted in, it will just look like a curve, which the real thing actually has, instead of being a big ugly gap. So it's a quick fast way of doing that, of literally we're going to do it on and we can glue it in place now. Because it's styrene, we can use some Tamiya extra thin, so we'll just give a bit of a bit on there like that, pop it on, just wiggle it up and down a few times to help it bed in, just like so. Then all we do is pop back some on the top and I'll drop down the back. There we go, just like so. So we can let that dry, and then hopefully what we can actually do is get this in, as we were saying, it'll go in, fit in there, and it'll look like a rounded part instead of looking a bit of an eyesore with a gap. Right, our next little trouble area, if you like, what we've actually got in, we've got in the hydraulic cooler here, which is the part that sticks up the top. Now, depending on the variant you either have it open or shut. I imagine this is going to be the same for all of them. But when you come to put it on, this gap here, this doesn't just simply push on like the rear one does. So we can't do it like we did with the rear one and roughly sit it in and then do it. It's going to take a bit more persuasion. What I've got down here are some little squares of plasticard, which is the 1mm stuff. And basically, sorry, it's the 1/2mm stuff, so we've got 3 in there, so we've got 1.5mm of plasticard each side, these squares, so then this part can literally go in there and sit in there just like that. Now we've got that black paint, which is a bit deceptive because it makes it look like there's a gap here, but there actually isn't. It's just a bit of black paint. I painted it all up black inside. So that then can be fitted on, but without it, it's a bit of a nightmare gap getting that on. So we get that glued into position in a moment. So that's on. and then what we can actually do then is fix the engines on. Now I'm fixing these engines on now because obviously the seam around here is going to be quite a tricky one to work with. So there again, that's going to basically go on. Quite straightforward. We're just going to sit in here like that, and then afterwards we'll worry about these sand filters. But I need the clearance to get around here, so what we're going to do is pop that on, and then the sand filters and the exhaust and that will go on afterwards. So we'll get this first one in here. Those will go on, and it's quite a good fit, to be honest. It will just sit there, bit of super glue perhaps, just to tack it in place. Then we can weld that into position, and that one's all okay and good to go. So we'll get those on there. Now that the filler is all totally dry, what I've actually been doing is going around, starting off with a very coarse sanding stick, just really shaking off the big things without trying to scratch the plastic underneath too much. Next, been going along with basically certain files, just getting finer and finer, just to smooth all this up, because it's quite a mess under here, as you can see. Then last of all, we've got some sponges, been going around with them. I'm just buffing up. Then as you can see little bits of white filler in here, and that's just a little bit of I've got here Valero's putty, just for dabbing in little areas. It's good for doing little areas, and it dries quite quickly as well to get in there. Then as you can probably see, if I catch it on the air, it's quite shiny underneath, where it's pretty well polished. You've got scratches, but the scratches are internal now, but it's a bit of a mess under there. But by the time we get a primer coat over it and everything else, it should be all nicely blended in. You can't feel anything, everything's nice and silky smooth, and no problems at all down there. But it's one of those areas that it's a bit of a mess. It didn't have to be as messy as that, but I tend to sort of slap it all over it and away we go and worry about it afterwards. But that will all be fine. What we've got to do now is basically go around and re-scribe everything. Now for that I'm using a needle. The reason I use a needle in a little clamp vise like this is that if you have a bit of a bend on it, you can get the sort of similar pressure by going along and just following the panel lines that we've filled up. And because there's a certain amount of them left, you can follow the ones you did. And because this bends a little bit, which is quite handy, it sort of gives you equal pressure. So what we do, we're just whipping down here now. And just take your time and let it slowly sort of go along and find its own way through. And it should follow your panel lines that you had before. Just like that. And say, nice even pressure. And we can do the same on these other ones. And what we're doing really is just going around tidying up everything. So we just do these down here, and as I say, let it do the work and not you. A bit like if you was going to be using a pea cutter, pull it, don't push down, and that way if it does suddenly slip out of a line or something, you're not in a world of pain where it's going to start being a problem to fix, or it runs off and makes a brand new panel line that you didn't really want, and various things like that. So we just run this down just to clean out these panel lines, which are a little bit deep anyway, so with a little bit of filler in there, it takes care of. We'll do the same to the underside, and we'll rescribe, which is dead simple because they just go bands right the way over. Usual thing, use a stencil type thing, he says, just finding one out. He says, tool chest, dive into the tool, sorry they're all a bit covered up, but what you can do, you can either place them freehand across where you want it to go. Something like that is a good one, and then as I say, with the needle, just let it drag its own way across. Now the thing is about using a needle instead of using like the pea cutter on here. The pea cutter will cut obviously quite easily into soft filler and certainly the plastic, but where we use super glue as a filler as well, that's really hard and it won't go in there and it will crack it and drag it. If you're using a needle, you can literally just go along and let the needle bend as it goes and just keep nice little light lines going across like that, and it should make, as we've got here, a nice little panel line running along. But we'll get all those finished in a moment and get those done. But we're happy that all these seam lines are all taken care of and they're all joined up. Down the back here, all I've got is a lump of blue tack, or white tack in this case, just in there to hold the back door on for the ramp. And then this ramp obviously will, around the right way, might even help, will go up in here as well to close up that gap so we don't get any spray going up inside. Now the other thing we can do, we're all happy with the cockpit and the way it's laid out and everything else like that, and then obviously as you saw a minute ago we've masked up, so this can actually be glued on in place. Now there's two ways of doing this. You can either put as I use some type of white PVA glue, gator glue I quite use, around the plastic areas, push it in and then hold and then just go round. Or the other way you can actually do it is to actually brush this on afterwards and let it go in there. But personally, for sort of filler's sake, I like to make sure that it's going to go in and all be okay. Now the thing with this is, obviously we've got dust particles, there's lots of bits and pieces flying around airborne in there that could stick to the inside of our glasswork. Now we've got to make sure this glasswork is nice and clean as possible, because we want it to be as clear so you can see in there. We don't want any big lumps, so we'll just give it a polish here with my t-shirt. That goes on, and then if we just whip the off here, so we get some CA glue, build down a bit, get the gooey stuff, all those lumps and bumps like this that you sometimes get off of the top, so we'll just lose them. So we've got some nice glue like this, and then all we're going to do is just run this down. Though we don't want gallons of it, obviously, we just want a bit. So all you do is I place it on, and you want more to the outside than certainly you do on the inside. The reason we don't use super glue and things like that is obviously it'll fog up, so you don't want to use any type of cryo super glues and bits like that. But we want to be quite generous, because this stuff, the beauty with it is it dries absolutely crystal clear, and if you do get it onto the inside of your glass, it won't really matter. Now the other thing that's handy with this is, you may have noticed I haven't put the plastic part on the front yet, which we will do obviously a bit later on, but not at the moment, because it's a way I can hold it like this at the front. So there we go, that's on. We're all happy with the cockpit. As you can see, we've got some simple harnesses in there which are made out of a bit of tape. Okay, so then all we're going to do is just transfer this over. We'll just hold the sides, and then we're going to come in and we're just going to place it in. Now nothing spectacular, as long as it's all in. Okay, and it's all on there, and we're happy with how it's sitting. Now don't worry about any big gaps. What we want to do is just to get in there for the moment and start to bite and hold. Now a way to sort of speed that up is you can put a rubber band around it if you wanted to, or you could hold it, whichever way, you know, basically it's a quick way for you. I'll use a rubber band just to speed this up so I can hold it. And what we're going to do, we're going to, in a moment, as you'll see, we'll just go round and we're just placing it round the back to the top, just like this, but it holds it in there in place. Then all we've got is a cotton bud, just moistening it a little bit, and we're just going to run it away and take off any excess that's hanging around the outside just for a moment. And what we're going to do, we're going to come back and we're going to take care of this a little bit better. But what we're going to do, we've got it like that, we're all happy, let it dry until this all goes clear, then we're going to come back and fill in any little gaps with some more gator glue. But we'll give this about 20 minutes or so to dry off. Right, so there we go, that's on there now. Pretty nice joint actually, there's no real holes or gaps or anything else, it fits pretty nicely on there. There's just a couple of little bits we want to take care of, so all we're going to do, we've just got some more gator glue, and what you can do, you can literally just go around, if you've got any holes anywhere, just give it a dab and fill them in, and just backtrack your way around it. So that's all we're doing with these, we're just taking care of any little gaps. And then same thing. Another thing you can actually do, which is a nice little touch, if you get some gator glue, water it down with just normal tap water, thin it down a bit, and then with a brush you can dab it on where you want it and let the capillary action go around with it, and then when it dries it gives you a nice skin layer, and you can build them up just like that, so that's quite nice. The other thing we can do is actually add the plastic part on the front. We're all happy how the wiring is all sitting and everything else. It does tend to curve around towards the inside, so you'll be able to see it all from in there, and then what happens is this part just clips on the front just like that. Obviously if you're doing the other type, you can get it out here, it's got the moulded in nose for the D type, which has got this funny nose around the front here. You can see it a bit better like that. So this one could go on there. Again, we're going to use some gator glue to pop this on as well, purely because we're going to get this on nice and quick now, because we don't want it to necessarily let in any dust and debris, and certainly we don't want any overspray in there and things like that. And because we're still near clear parts, we don't want any fogging or any issues like that. So what we do is just carefully hold, and we just pop some glue on the inside, just like so, and just carefully hold it. And what we'll do is just pop this on, pop it down, hold it into position. If you wanted to, there again, you could just pop in here with a rubber band just to help that in, is what I'm going to do. So what we'll do, we just stick a rubber band right on the nose, just popping it around to the rear. What we'll do, we'll pop it up on the front here to keep it just like that. I want it to run nice down the middle. Cotton bud again, moisten it, and we just get rid of all the excess, and we're just cleaning up the little areas just to make them look a bit better. Just make sure you get all the glue off of any areas you don't want. There we go, that's on. We'll let that dry now, and that'll go on nice and firm, and all that cabling's taken care of. And then what we really are, we're going to get a primer coat onto this next, just to make sure we're happy with how it's looking, and then we can go on and get some of these surface details on there. There's quite numerous ones to go on. There's a little lumps and bumps all over this one that have got to go on there. But what we'll probably do is pop a primer coat on, just so we can make sure everything's looking nice first, get them on, re-prime, happy with the surface, then we can get in usual things then with obviously pre-post shading and various bits and pieces like that. Okay, so we moved over to the spray bay. What I've actually done is got some lumps of the old white tack and just generally poked them in all the holes. We've still got the rubber band holding it on, because it actually holds this back area in, and the nose is still a little bit tacky. When I took it off, it started to move a bit, so it needs a little bit more. But what I can do now is we can do this glass work at the front, which needs to be black. So what we do, we've got some normal flat black, heavily shaken, and we're just pouring this neat into a colour cup. Not too much, go mad with it. Then all we do is check our flow. Okay, all we're going to do is spray the cockpit area black, usual thing, so it just shows from the inside. It just gives us that effect of it being black metal. So we just dust over this front area quite liberally. And what we'll do at the same time of doing those, we can actually do these areas in here, the fueling bay. This side's black, so we can get it in there. And then what we'll do, we're just going to pop around and check these panels and seals are all okay under here at the same time. So that's what we're doing. So we can just make sure these all look okay and there's no large joins, lumps and bumps and things like that. So that's all okay. Just cut into air just to dry it off. So they're absolutely fine. We just put drop more black into there. Just cut to air, and we just let that dry off. And as that's drying, what we can actually do, just like that, if we pop it on its side, just like so. What we can do, we're not going to worry about blowing out the colour because it's just a primer, so we've got a bit of black left in there. We'll just switch over. What I've got is some Sea Grey XF25. I just happen to have a load of it lying around so I can use it as a primer. Now I've already pre-thinned this a bit because I was running down to a bit left in the bottom of this particular bottle. So all we're going to do, we'll get the extractor on, compressor's on, and all we're going to do is lightly prime everything on this one. So we're just light building up the colour so we can literally go around and make sure we're all happy how it all is. And obviously it'll make it all one tone, so when we come along with the pre-shading, it gives it something to look at. But this is, say, it's our usual thing. This is our last chance to really have a good look at it and make sure we're all happy with all the lines, the panel lines are all okay. Quite a thin mix this actually, I'll probably over thin this a bit, so it'll take a bit to get this going. So we'll just give this a dusty coat first, absolutely everywhere. There we go, just cut to air to dry this back a bit. It's a particularly warm day today, so it's not going to take much to do this one. Underside. And as I say, it's just a primer, so we're not that worried about it. It's just going to be for making sure all the seams and everything is all okay. There's no lumps and bumps we need to take care of, things like that. So I'll carry on getting this one primed up.